All right, so we are now broadcasting. My name is Andy Port. I'm the Director of Planning and Development for the City of Newburyport. Just wanted to let folks know that we're using an online Zoom format, obviously, for our meetings. If you're here, you know that. If there's anybody from the general public who's here and is interested in speaking during public comment for anything or addressing the committee, there is a raise hand feature in Zoom, and that will tell us that you're interested in speaking, and the chair will call upon you, or I will helping him during public comment for any particular part of the meeting. So stay tuned and raise your hand if you're interested in speaking. For the applicants, we will, because we know who you are, we will unmute you at the time of your presentation. So with that, if there's any other questions that can be, addressed by the committee during the public comment once your hand is raised and I've unmuted you. So with that, I'll just pass the meeting back to the chair.
Thanks, Andy. This is Mike Doucette. I'm the chair of the Community Preservation Committee and call this meeting to order. Thank you for your patience during these challenging times. And also, I will ask you for your patience with me tonight, since this is my maiden voyage chairing one of these circuses. So I'm going to rely on Andy to help me out technically and to make sure that I don't miss anybody who wants to participate and contribute to the meeting. I will also ask that whenever anybody is given the floor and is speaking, that includes our committee members as well as members of the public, that you identify yourself by name. I know that's a little difficult to remember all the time, but please do. It will assist our note taker in the preparation of the minutes so that we have accurate minutes and we know who said what about what. With us here tonight are committee members Ron Zimba, Paul Healy, Don Little, Don Walters, Jane Healy, and Mark Rosen. Also in attendance is Caitlin Sullivan from the Planning Office, Andrew Port from the Planning Office, and our note taker, Rachel Kusick. I'd like to remind everybody, and I hope that many of you have participated in similar Zoom meetings before, that you have to be more aware of speaking and the delay in speaking, to be careful not to speak over someone. Certainly the ability to have you acknowledged with your hand raised and then giving you the floor is helping us there. But there is often a delay, and you need to be careful at the end of your sentence or before you jump in that the way is clear. You all know the raise hand feature, and that's going to be employed so that you can get recognized. Here we go. The regular business of the committee, in terms of not dealing with hearing presentations from the applicants, will take place after all of the presentations. You're welcome to continue on and be with us then as members of the public, but you don't feel like you need to. But do be aware, especially applicants, that the current scheduled deliberation date is May 26th, but there is a conflict that night with the ZBA, and since the city is only sponsoring one Zoom meeting per evening, we will need to reschedule that meeting, and we'll have that discussion and pick a date at the end of this meeting. And we're shooting for May 27th, subject to a poll of all our members that they can be there that night. Our application review process, and I hope many of you are familiar with it, will have each applicant make a presentation. And you should all be aware, that is the applicants and the presenters, that the committee has had your applications and all the material attached, has read it carefully and are very familiar with the contents of your application. We will proceed with the order set on the agenda. We will try to limit each discussion for each application to 10 to 15 minutes, which will include your presentation, committee's questions, and any public comment. We will open public comment for each individual application following that presentation and the completion of the questions from the committee. Okay, before we get started with our first application, I'd like to just take a minute to remind the committee members of even though we're in these strange times, we are still bound by the rules that pertain to all public bodies like ourselves with regard to open meeting laws, and would like you to recall that those basic rules are such that any deliberation among more than a quorum of the committee that does not take place in a posted public meeting is a violation of that law. And the law defines deliberation to include a communication, including electronic communications, that includes a quorum of the committee and deals with matters that come within our jurisdiction. The only exceptions being administrative matters such as scheduling, circulating proposed agendas, or circulating documents in our agenda packages that are to be discussed at the meeting. And that's provided that that circulation and those communications do not contain any discussion or opinion as to any matter that's coming before the committee. So just keep that in mind, be careful about it, and as a practical matter, if you have any questions about having discussions outside of a meeting, please give me a call or give Jane a call or give Caitlin a call, and we can direct you appropriately. And that also goes to if individual committee members want to have questions answered, either from applicants or otherwise, about something that we will be deliberating, please let Caitlin, me, or Jane know those particular questions, and we will initiate appropriate communications to get that information in front of all the committee members for deliberation, discussion, and input from you at the public meeting. Okay, here we are, getting ready to go on our agenda for tonight. The first application is the Cushing House Cobble Courtyard Phase 2, presented by the Historical Society of Old Newbury. The requested amount of $30,250.
Hi, Susan. You've been unmuted, so if you'd like to make a presentation, I can pull up any materials you've submitted to the Preservation Committee.
Okay. Why don't I start, and then you can put I did submit 3 photographs, and after I go over just the basic summary, then I think it would be helpful to put the photographs up.
Okay.
Okay. This is phase 2 of this 3-phase courtyard project, and the area that it consists of is the largest cobble area in the garden. It's between the laundry yard and the carriage barn, and it's the part that provides the access to both the gardens and to the Perkins printing and engraving print, which is used for programs more and more. The courtyard is also the most undermined area of the museum's design landscapes. And the goal is to make it barrier-free and to provide full access to the property. The treatment proposals are based on a landscape plan that was produced in 2017 for the museum, funded by the Massachusetts Historical Commission and a private foundation for the matching funds. And it maintains the significant historic integrity of the landscape, and that is contemporary with the Cushing House. But at the same time, it allows us to have 21st century use. The area would be used for outside programs, workshops, demonstrations, as well as small events. All of the original materials will be reused. This area does call for a granite path, which would be set down the middle of, or not actually the middle, but will bisect the courtyard so that it will be accessible for both wheelchairs, walkers, and anybody with any disabilities. One of the most important things is the grading and the drainage, which, as you can see from the photographs that I submitted with the application, has been a serious problem over the years through freeze and thaw of 2 centuries, because this is contemporary with the house itself. One of the things that has happened in this photograph that Andy has up now, you can see how uneven the cobblestones are. We have had people not injure themselves, but be very, very unsteady there. It's a huge liability. And we feel that until it's properly dealt with, it can't be used for public access any longer. One of the nice things that we have found out during the pandemic is that people are going and using the garden for quiet retreat, sitting on the benches, and enjoying the spring flowers as they're about to come out. All of our programs and access to the property is free for Newburyport residents. Entrance to the Cushing House is also free to Newburyport residents. So this is perceived by us to make it more available and more of an integral part of the community. This is a much better shot of the moss and the uneven stones. And when we get to the pictures that I submitted today, again, the same area, you'll see also in the center of that photograph a raised cistern, which will also be addressed during this treatment so that that will not be sticking up high above the cobblestones anymore. The lawn area would be sodded. It also will be graded, and the cobbles will be the same level as the grass that you see there. Non-historic plantings will be removed, and we will use the plantings that are listed in the original planting plan for the area. That's another well area, also in that same part of the courtyard. The lattice fence separates this area of the courtyard from what we call the cart path, which leads up to the carriage house. It's pretty rotten right now. Our plan would be to match the original using in-kind materials, but to also insert a lattice gate in there so that when we do have larger events, we can open up the courtyard to the cart path area. And these are the Historic American Building Survey plans that were done in 1936. And there were a series of these that were done along with photographs. So what I have done here is to highlight the treatment area for which we're requesting funds. And to the right of that is that cart path that I was just referring to. So this is the prime entry point to the rest of the property. And the area in front of that red rectangle is the area that was completed this past summer. These are a little difficult to read because they're so small, so I won't go into any detail about these. These were provided as part of the preservation plan by Landscape Elements. So a lot of these are repetitive of the photographs that I had taken, but it gives you perhaps a fuller scope of the project. And that gate actually leads into the formal garden, and then below it, the kitchen garden and the path to the Perkins printing and engraving building. The path will be widened as the one in the laundry yard was to meet ADA standards.
Susan, let us know when you're finished with your presentation, and I'll open it up to questions from the committee.
Okay. I submitted 3 photographs today, which I think would be important for people to see. This is the area that was just completed with CPC funds from, I believe it was 2018 that they were awarded, and the work was done this past year. So that you can see this was, for those of you who are familiar with the property, this was completely uneven. It had pools of water in it and ice in the wintertime. So the cobbles that you see there on the edge are the finished product of that textured but even surface that will happen throughout the courtyard when it's properly treated. The fence is also a lattice fence like the one in this current pending project. And this was all handcrafted, but using the same pattern that was actually there. You can go ahead to the next one, Andy. And a close-up of that. The entire brick path was relayed too. So this does now meet all standards for ADA. So that's the end of my presentation. We are requesting half. Again, that's the stonework that you see on the edge, which was completely impassable before and actually is quite easy to walk on now. But it's not as important here as it will be in the courtyard because that's where most people do gather. The amount that we're requesting is 1/2 of the total project cost. And we are securing funds from private gifts and foundations to match any CPC money if awarded.
A couple of questions. This is Mike Doucette. The numbers that you have in your budget here and the contractors that you may or may not have yet selected, do you anticipate they will be the same people that did the earlier work, phase of the work?
We will put it out to bid as we do all of our projects. We were very pleased with the work that was done this last summer, and it was actually a very competitive price. So I can't actually say that until we put it out to bid.
Okay. But the numbers you've used in this estimate of costs, how did you arrive at those?
Actually, in 2 ways. The landscape architect who drafted the plan had given us figures for each phase of the project. And I worked with both those and also had a very detailed proposal put together by the landscape architect who did phase one.
Okay.
And they were almost identical.
Thank you. Anyone else from the committee have any questions?
Yes, this is Paul Healy. I just had one question on your source of funds. You list $20,250 from the Mass Historical Commission. Do you know for certain that you're getting that? Or
I know that we are not getting it because with the COVID emergencies, we shut our office down altogether. I did not have time to finish the proposal and submit it to Mass Historical by the 26th.
oh,
But we have been in touch with several foundations who have funded this in the past who are interested in the project. And we have also been receiving private gifts towards that, towards the project, knowing that we did not get the application into Mass Historical.
right. Okay. And so if we did award this and you didn't raise the other 20,000, you have a backup plan?
If we don't raise it,
Yeah.
then we would we have a restricted fund within our endowment, which is used for what we consider our collections. The building is the largest part of our collection. So we would use some of those restricted funds to make up any difference.
Ah, okay. Okay, very good. Thank you.
Okay. Don Little, you have your hand up?
Yes, Don Little. We have two other applications tonight that received letters of support from the Newburyport Historical Commission. I know that this applicant was at a February NHC meeting. Should we have received a letter of support, or were you there for another purpose?
I was there for another purpose, but we did ask for a letter of support. I'm not sure why you didn't receive one.
This is Andy Port. Just a question. Caitlin, do you happen to know if there was any follow-up on that item or request?
I believe they were there at the Historic Commission last time to discuss the preservation restriction, a new draft preservation restriction for the whole building.
That's correct. That was my intent to be at that meeting, was to discuss the preservation restriction and to approve the plans for the electrical project. But I had contacted them prior to that when the application was being prepared, asking for a letter of support.
Okay, we can follow up with the chair from the NHC on that.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yeah, this is Andy again. Yeah, if we could just, we have time to do that actually before the CPC's deliberations. We have a month or so, so that's good. We can get that.
I'd be happy to reach out to the chair as well again and see if for some reason he didn't receive the request or if there was some sort of a misstep.
Yeah, so we'll definitely make sure it's on their next agenda. Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you.
Jane Healy, your hand's up.
Hi, Jane Healy. Most of my questions have been addressed. I just wanted to quickly circle back to the estimates of cost or costs. And I was wondering, Susan, if you could just let us know when these costs were reached, when the estimate had come in. Is it fairly recent or a few years?
The landscape architect prepared hers in, she revised them. The report was completed in December of 2017, and she revised them in 2018. And then the ones that I received from the landscape architect who did phase one met with me in November of 2019. And that's why I say his numbers were about the same as hers, but he also came in underbid on the first phase. So I think that probably is why.
Okay, so your 2019 numbers looked a lot like these numbers.
Almost identical.
And you had mentioned this area is used or will be used for events. Could you speak to if it's open to the general public?
Yes, all of our community programming is open to the general public without charge. Occasionally, we have a program for which we do have a charge, but all of our public programs are open to everyone and free. We had a few programs there, not this past summer, but the summer before. We had some family history programs that were demonstrations of making ship models, revolutionary tavern songs, a variety of different family-oriented programs. We've also done other workshops and programs out there. We've had a concert, and of course, the only event that we have there that does have a fee attached to it is our annual garden tour, but it's a fairly modest fee.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Don Walters, questions?
Yes, just a couple things, Susan. Thank you again for the presentation. You mentioned in your presentation as well as in your written report that the cobblestones are uneven or uneven stones. Noting that this is of historical significance, would you mind educating me and that if this was to be brought back to its historical appropriateness, were the cobblestones or stones actually level, flat, et cetera, as you're requesting this to be? Or is this more being driven by societal needs with respect to access for certain types of people?
That's a good question. They did not look like this. We have some early photographs, 19th century photographs of this area of the courtyard as well as the laundry yard, and it was actually quite level. And it has gotten progressively worse, partly due to the drainage issues. And the base under which the cobblestones are laid are not sufficient to keep them from this freeze thaw where they get more and more uneven. In the 7 years that I've been with the museum, it has gotten progressively worse. So the way that what you see in the laundry yard now is the way this will look. It will still be textured, but it won't be undulating. But no, it did not look like this when it was first laid.
Okay, thank you. And just one other question, perhaps a bit of a follow-up, albeit a tangent, with respect to Jane's. Would you happen to give us could you give us an idea of the type of attendance you see on an annual basis at the Cushing House? Do you somehow have an approximate count? I'm just curious.
We do. For our public community programs, we have an average of about 100 people at a program. Obviously for events, we have a good deal more. I would say a year, an annual attendance would be around 4,000 to 5,000 people.
Thank you. And Mike, I'm done. Thank you.
Okay. Ron Zimba, question?
Yes, thank you, Mike. Susan, I just wanted to vouch for your description of that historical commission meeting that you described earlier. It was as you said, and I'm surprised that you don't have that we don't have the letter here yet. But I will second Mike's comment that we have plenty of time to get that letter, and I assure you it will be just as you and us discussed at that historical commission meeting.
Great, thank you, Ron.
Okay, any other questions from the committee? All right, then I can open up for public comment this application. If anyone would like to raise their hand.
Mr.
Okay.
Chair, this is Andy. Yeah, I'm not seeing anyone right now.
Okay, that's good. Well, Susan, thank you for your presentation, and check the city website in terms of the date we eventually schedule for the deliberations.
I will do that. Thank you very much, all of you.
Okay. Next application we will hear is from the Newburyport Public Library Archival Center HVAC replacement, and is presented by the Public Library.
And so this is Andy Port. I've just unmuted Giselle Stevens, who's going to be making the presentation. She's the director of the library.
Good evening. This is Giselle Stevens, the head librarian at the Newburyport Public Library. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Terrific. Thank you for inviting me this evening. I know you've all had a chance to look over our application, so I'll just very briefly summarize it and then open it up to questions. So as you know, the Newburyport Public Library has a wonderful archival center in our lower level. We have a public reading room. It is open 6 days a week to the public and is staffed by a professional archivist and a part-time assistant archivist. We have an invaluable, unique collection of local history resources, genealogy resources. I won't go into detail with that, but it is an invaluable collection. We opened the archival center with the opening of the renovated and expanded library in 2001. And believe it or not, that's almost 20 years ago now. And our archival center has a separate HVAC system to control its temperature and humidity. These are 2 Liebert units that have reached the end of their life. And this proposal is to replace those 2 Liebert units and to add 2 new humidifiers to help control the temperature and humidity in the archival center, which will help us preserve all those unique materials that are in our collection. So I think that's pretty straightforward. And if you have any questions, I would love to answer them.
Okay, we have questions from the committee. You want to raise your hand if you have a question. Don Waters?
Yes, good evening. Have you had a chance to take this report and share it with Molly Ettenborough? The reason I ask is that the city of Newburyport is very interested in being sure that our energy profile, our carbon footprint is as low as it can be. And there's other technologies that may be available. And I was wondering if you haven't had a chance, would you be agreeable to perhaps chatting with her or members of the Energy Advisory Committee to confirm that they think this is the best approach, or perhaps come up with a different approach that may be more cost effective and equal the same performance that you're looking for.
Did speak with Molly indeed about this, and I of course would be open to meeting with her committee as well. I believe that Mike Bartlett, our facilities manager, is also in on this meeting, and he might also be able to answer some of these questions for you. We did look into, when we got the quote for the units, we did have the company ATCO look into some other kinds of possible units to install. These are very specialized units for the temperature control in the archival center.
Sure, no, I do understand that. Thank you.
Don Little, question?
Don Little, just a comment actually from my fellow committee members. I just encourage you to read or reread the The letter of support, I think it's on page 32 from the Friends of the Newburyport Public Library. The second paragraph just gives some details about the damage that's being done.
Okay, thank you. Jane Healy.
Hi, Giselle, Jane Healy.
Hi, Jane.
I see your request for 127,000. The application doesn't include the estimate, and I know you just mentioned the name of the firm.
It does include the estimate.
Oh, I see it. I just happened to flip to it. Okay, thank you.
Good.
Don Walter's question was very much of interest to me as well. I'm glad that you have spoken to Molly. It'd be interesting to see if anything further came from that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions from the committee?
Oh.
Seeing none, I can open this up for public comment. If you would like to make a comment, please raise your hand. Okay.
I don't see any, Chair.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Giselle. And again, check the city website for the date of our deliberation meeting. Thank you
I
again.
will. Thank you very much for your time and consideration. I really appreciate it.
Okay. The next application we will hear is project name, restoration of the 1930 Maxim fire truck used by the Newburyport Fire Department from 1938 to 2013. And the applicant is the Newburyport Fire Department.
And this is Andy Port. We have Chief Leclerc with us this evening to speak to this particular application.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, Chief, thank you.
Also with us is on another line, Andy, you should have as Deputy Bradbury in case I leave anything out. But this project is to restore the 1938 Maxim fire engine that has been with the city. It was purchased new. It was ordered specifically for Newburyport. Been with us for 82 years now. Just recently taken out of service for fires, but is still in use for many things that we deal with. But the vehicle is mechanically and structurally sound. It needs repair and restoration of body and cab, hood and fenders, cosmetic stuff. The city has invested some money in mechanical repairs over the years, and the vehicle has been and is still roadworthy, registered and inspected. The vehicle's value to the city is immeasurable, as it is a critical integral part of Newburyport's history. The picture you see there is the delivery photo on the day that it was built at the factory in 1938. What the vehicle looks like now as far as the lettering and the striping is certainly different than that, as there have been a few well-intentioned attempts over the years to restore the vehicle or to repaint certain panels, obviously with colors that don't match, and certainly the vehicle needs some assistance there. The vehicle is still used in parades, educational seminars, city events, unfortunately used at firefighter funerals, and is a treasured historical piece, both by the department and our residents. After 82 years, it is indeed in need of a full frame-off restoration so it can be enjoyed by residents of Newburyport for decades to come. As there are no budget line items for this type of work, it was suggested that we come and approach these grant funds to see if we can get this done. The estimate was drawn from Coastal Truck and Auto Body out of Portsmouth. There are some restoration companies, or there were, E.J. Murphy in North Attleboro, that have since gone out of business, and Firefly Restoration in Hope, Maine, who was contacted for this project. That is, you know, these people that do these projects, the old-time craftsmen are all getting up there in age and retiring, or unfortunately have died off. So the only one really interested in this type of work around here is Coastal Truck and Auto Body, and that's where the estimate came from. As I said, this is a treasured piece of the Newburyport Fire Department, and it's been here with the city since it was brand new, and we'd like to keep it here forever, but it does need some restoration work. Deputy Bradbury, did I leave anything out?
Yeah, I just like, just to count you on the historical significance of it. And, just to remind everybody that the vehicle was purchased by Mayor Bossy Gillis. It's probably one of the last working things that he purchased. And, he's got quite the historical significance himself in the city. And it is used by funerals. As a matter of fact, we do have people that have reached out to us that want to use it in their upcoming funerals. That's been going on for a long time, and it still gets significant use in parades, Kids Day in the park. There's always pictures taken with it. So I think it's a unique type of situation for the Community Preservation Fund. I don't think there's been anything like it in the past, and I'd like to have them seriously consider the funding for it. That's all I got.
Okay. Thank you very much. See a committee member hand raised. Don Walters, question?
Yes. If you go ahead with this restoration, even though it sounds like there's only one company, would you still put this out for bids, or would you attempt to do a sole source negotiation for this restoration?
I think we'd be forced to do a sole source price on this. Coastal is, like I said, the only one around here that was even interested in giving us estimates on it, due to the level of work involved in taking the vehicle apart. As you see by the pictures, all the intricate pieces, they have to be taken apart, numbered, restored. The lettering, the striping, especially the striping, has to be done off the vehicle while it's apart, because once it's back together, you won't get stripes in certain places. So it's very, very labor intensive. Coastal's the only one that was interested in actually coming to the station and giving us an estimate. And most of the, at least in the area, most of the restoration companies that specialize in antique fire trucks, like I say, are few and far between, especially around here.
Understand. Thank you for that clarification. Just one other question. I think this is actually having a brother and a father that were ex-firemen, albeit volunteer. Actually, one was paid, and commissioners and myself learning how to play pool at a firehouse. I have a certain affinity for it. Having said that, do you have any ideas how you could increase the public to see? Let's say we do all this, and I do, being Yankee homecoming, et cetera, you see it once in a while. But have you ever had any thoughts of how you could perhaps let the residents of Newburyport see it more often? As an example, maybe every Saturday morning or something, the firehouse door is open. And believe me, I understand the most important thing is fire medic safety and everything. But I was just wondering, in your meetings, whatever, have you ever thought of ways that you could somehow increase the public to see this beautiful relic?
Well, we try to balance that, and we had it down at the car show. We put it out we're very proud of it, so we put it out every chance we get. And we balance that with, it's like Kids Day in the park, the children climbing over, and it's fragile, and we have to watch it all the time. There's pieces that can be stolen off it or broken very easy. So it certainly wouldn't be left anywhere, but Kids Day in the Park at Maudsley and other places, and Yankee Homecoming and Atkinson Common, any place that we can get it out there, it's certainly out there. And we certainly wouldn't have any qualms with putting it in more events. But again, it's one of those things that somebody has to be with it and has to be, guarded because of the value of it.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time and your answers.
Yeah, I can comment on that also. It's Deputy Bradbury. I mean, until the, we didn't take it out a lot before because it had mechanical issues. So we've invested, I think the chief can give the correct amount, but somewhere between 15 and 20 grand out of our own budget on it. So now it's more roadworthy. So I think, would be certainly more open to that. And we do get it out significantly, but I think that, now that's mechanically sound. We've had to push it, during the Yankee Homecoming Parade before because there was some mechanical issues with it, but it's running really good now. So I think that would certainly be open for more use, no question.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from the committee? Yes, Mark Rosen.
Here I am. Thank you. Michael, it's actually a point of information. Do we have any prior examples of awarding money for a non-real property preservation project?
I'm trying to think. I don't think we've done any documents.
Is it allowed to, I mean?
Yes, it's eligible. But
Okay, it is, okay.
I don't think in the city we've had the opportunity to do it as yet.
Oh, okay, all right. I just wanted to make sure it was eligible because we have only talked about properties in the past, so. Okay, thank you.
Mike, this is Andy. I agree. I don't think on the inventory of projects that have been approved that anything of this nature has been, but I'd agree it's certainly eligible.
Okay. Jane Healy, you have a question.
Just to speak to that further, I took a look at the CPA's technical database or project database, and there's at least a half dozen other fire trucks actually that have received restoration funding in the state.
In the state, great, okay. Good. Any other questions from the committee? Okay, then I can open this up for public comment. Please raise your hand if you'd like to make a comment. Okay, seeing none, we can thank Chief.
Thank you.
And check in for our meeting date for deliberations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next application is from the planning office. Project name is Artichoke River Woods Watershed Land Conservation Project. And I believe Jordy Vining is the presenter.
Yes, I'm here. Hello. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, great. I think I'll give a quick overview here. I think Vanessa Johnson Hall of Essex County Greenbelt is also with us. I can't see who's with us, but I believe she was going to be tuning in, and I'm not sure if Tom or Chris or anyone from the water department is here. I guess we'll figure that out as we go. But Andy, perhaps I could ask you to put up one of the maps, page 8 of the application, the regional topo map. I thought that might be just a reasonable one to take a look at. Yeah, there you go. And as I just give an overview, I appreciate the committee's reviewed everything in the application, and we can go through the photos or the other maps if anyone's interested. But I guess in short, so is it possible for someone to mute their, I just hear some talking in the background. Anyway, sorry about that. This project is intended to help protect 38 acres of undeveloped watershed land and our Artichoke Reservoir drinking water supply as a primary focal point of this conservation project. And as we talked about in the application, Newburyport gets 86% of its drinking water from the system, interconnected system of surface reservoirs, and about 1,000 feet of this property runs adjacent to the Artichoke Reservoir. And it's 100% within the so-called Zone A and Zone B water supply protection zones. And this regional map, I think, is a good one because it demonstrates how the city of Newburyport owns directly abutting land in West Newbury, right to the south there, as part of the protection of the watershed, as well as access to one of the dams that's there just to the south of this property. Basically, about a century or so ago, the Commonwealth authorized the city of Newburyport to acquire land in West Newbury and to establish this system of reservoirs that we certainly depend upon now for our drinking water, and an authorization to not only establish it, but to protect its water quality. So Newburyport owns other watershed open space land on the West Newbury side of the line, down at the southern end of the Upper Artichoke Reservoir, as well as around the, we're zoomed in a bit here, but around the Indian Hill Reservoir. a number of Newburyport citizens, particularly newcomers, are not particularly aware of conservation land that the public owns in the common pasture and so forth. And I would definitely wager that many are not aware of the land Newburyport owns around our reservoirs in West Newbury. But there is still a lot of the reservoir watershed that the public does not own and control. And there are definitely some current and anticipated threats to the city's drinking water supply due to, existing or potential incompatible land uses. And any residential development in these areas does increase the risk to our drinking water from septic systems, failing septic systems, and household hazardous wastes, and lawn fertilizers and pesticides and herbicides and so forth. And it's become pretty clear in recent times that significant new water supply sources are really not on the horizon for Newburyport, and we have to basically protect what we have. So land planners have already demonstrated that this particular property would otherwise support something between 10 and 13 homes on septic systems with a 1,600-foot roadway going in there. It's also, I think, important to note that this is beautiful land, beautiful woodland. It's, I think we listed it out in the application, how it's designated as prime forest land and by the state, and it has pretty high ecological integrity. Natural heritage describes portions of it as, characterize it as core habitat and critical natural landscape. And there's an existing trail system on this property that people have used, which Essex County Greenbelt, once we finish this project, would be in a position to enhance and maintain. I guess just quickly, in terms of funding and other funding, this is definitely a coalition project. This is a partnership between Essex County Greenbelt and the city of Newburyport and the town of West Newbury and the state. The outcome for us will be a co-held conservation restriction with Essex County Greenbelt owning the fee and actually managing the property. We got some good news just recently that the city, we were notified that we are going to receive a $300,000 state drinking water supply protection grant for this project or towards this project. That's the same grant that the city used as a building block for protection of the so-called Cooper North pasture property in the common pasture. So that's a pretty significant building block for this this overall project, which is about, I think it's a little over $1 million. West Newbury's CPC has approved the project to go on the town meeting warrant, which will be in a few weeks' time. So the CPA request here will help leverage, something along the lines of $800,000 in other funding. And Essex County Greenbelt has negotiated a purchase and sale agreement with the owners to purchase this property at a fairly significant discount to the tune of several $100,000. The project fulfills all kinds of CPC criteria. So I guess just finally, the request is that for the CPA allocation is to draw from the existing open space reserve fund. That reserve fund has about $730,000 in it. And as the CPC, as we've all talked about before, the purpose of the reserve fund is to have a significant amount of funding on hand and available for conservation projects when they arise. And after, if this funding request is successful, there will still be over $500,000 available for other potential projects in that reserve, even without the new request for this fiscal year. So that's my hopefully quick overview. If Vanessa from Essex County Greenbelt is here. Perhaps I'd like to ask if she has any other comments.
I am here. This is Vanessa Johnson Hall with Essex County Greenbelt Association. I think Jordy did an excellent job of summarizing this project. It really is a phenomenal. I was going to say it's a watershed project, no pun intended, in terms of the degree of partnership involved. The coalition that we've built to help preserve this land is remarkable. Between Newburyport, West Newbury, there's a tremendous amount of support for this as well. The Massachusetts Department of Conservation and Recreation is also very interested in helping to support this project. And of course, this is a high priority for Greenbelt as well. And we are hugely excited to see this project having reached the stage it has. And we have very understanding sellers. We've just extended our purchase and sale agreement through the end of March to give us all additional time to work through this pandemic, to get all of the paperwork done. So we are optimistic that we will get to the finish line with this. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
And I just ask, is Chris or Tom from the Water Department here by any chance? If they wanted to speak? Doesn't sound like it. It's okay. So,
Okay.
Jordy, this is Andy. There's a person in the audience that's TD CJR. I'm not exactly sure who that is, but everyone else, it does not appear to be Tom or Chris. So
but that's fine. I wasn't sure whether they were.
Hang on one second. We do have a raised hand here. It appears that maybe their name is just not allowed, is not in there. So I'm allowing them to speak.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, this is Tom Cusick, the superintendent for the water treatment plant.
Great.
Okay, Tom.
I'm here. Yes, I just wanted to reiterate what everyone's talking about. It's this is a great project. It's exactly what the city needs to protect the watershed, and I think it's a great way to start and build upon. I definitely commend everyone that worked on it. They did a phenomenal job to put this all together. As what was stated earlier, there are definitely a lot of impacts to these areas, and they're very important to secure when the opportunity comes up. Because once they go by, and that gets passed on to someone else, you lose that opportunity. And so I really can't emphasize enough at how important it really is to secure these kinds of lands around the reservoir, and specifically when they're in neighboring communities, and sometimes out of your control. So I guess I would just full support, obviously, and hope that we can continue the effort and move forward.
Okay, any questions from the committee? Yes, Paul Healy. Paul, do you have a question?
He is unmuted. I'm not sure if he's maybe stepped away from his computer or something.
Okay. Don Waters, you have a question.
I do, thank you. Just to perhaps build on Tom's most recent statement regarding this is a great start, and to build upon it. When I take a look at one of the maps, Jordy, there's three for them, they're similar. When I take a look at the land that is open for purchase, if I take a look at the land that is immediately south of that and borders the Artichoke Reservation, actually it looks like there's several parcels. Is part of the plan between the city and or the Greenbelt and other entities to purchase some of that other land, or is that land just not available? And the only reason I ask is what's the probability that you think going forth in the future we'll have additional requests to purchase other land on the West Newbury side? Because of course, when I take a look at the Newburyport side, there's all housing there, so that's not going to happen. So I didn't know if you had any plans, or anyone else, the water department had any plans.
I would quickly speak to that and then ask Vanessa to speak to that. The city doesn't have any sort of isn't sort of in any sort of negotiation or anticipating on the foreseeable horizon any other deals along these lines. As Tom was alluding to, these sort of opportunities actually don't arise that often. So there are certainly other undeveloped pieces of land around the reservoir system which are of interest to the city, and that sometime in the future we would hope we have the opportunity to try to protect and protect our drinking water supply, but we don't. That's not something that's sort of in the immediately foreseeable future. In terms of that piece of land that I think you're referring to the south of this property, going down to Middle Street, there is a house. I mean, it is developed to some extent. There is a house now on that property. And it's possible that Essex County Greenbelt has had some interaction with that landowner in the past. I'm not sure. I'd have to pass that baton over to Vanessa.
This is Vanessa. Yes, we've reached out to, as is typical with a lot of projects like this, we reached out to neighboring landowners or had conversations with them in the past. I've not had recent conversations with neighboring landowners since we got this property under agreement, but it's certainly part of my to-do list. It's you know, as Jordy said, you can't always predict when people are ready to preserve their land. But part of my job is to cultivate and maintain relationships with people so that when they are ready, we're here and available to try to put a project together. So nothing, as far as I know, nothing is imminently planned for development on any of the surrounding lands, which is the good news. I don't see them as being immediately threatened, just based on who the landowners are. And we're optimistic that at some point in the future, they might be potential conservation partners.
Thank you, Mike, and I don't have any other questions.
Okay, Paul Healy, are you there?
Yes, hi, this is Paul.
Okay.
The question I had was, you know, there's several different parties involved in raking together this money. I was wondering if there's any time constraints on when it has to all fit into place.
This is Vanessa. I can answer that. The deadline on our purchase and sale agreement, which Greenbelt is holding with the sellers right now, is March 31st of 2021. So that's the deadline.
I would say that's a deadline that's also been extended because of all the craziness in the world right now. So the general approach has been to try to pull this project together this calendar year, and we have a little bit more breathing room due to the you know, flexibility and cooperation of the landowners and Essex County Greenbelt working relationship with them.
Good. Paul, is that are you okay with that? Okay, Don Little, you have a question?
Yep, Don Little. In the application on page 3, top paragraph in the middle, it states the West Newbury Community Preservation Committee recently approved an application for $175,000. And this application to Newburyport is $225,000. Is there an easy answer to explain those two different numbers?
I think the easiest answer is that this project is the lion's share of benefit is for the city of Newburyport. The project is watershed land for our reservoir, and we're the ones, even though some of this water is sold back to West Newbury in the summertime, it's Newburyport's water supply. So so that's probably one of the main reasons. I would say that the other reason is Newburyport is considerably bigger than West Newbury and has a bigger sort of pot of potential CPA funding. So when we were trying to sort out what was going to be available from whom, these are the numbers that we came up with. I would note that Newburyport has an open space reserve fund, which we've been contributing to over the years. West Newbury does also, but it's much smaller, and they're going to be, Vanessa can speak to this, I think, but I think they're going to be fully drawing it down as well as spending some of their annual allocation. So they're in a somewhat different place than Newburyport when it comes to the contribution.
That's correct, Jordy.
Very good, thanks.
Chair, this is Andy. I just wanted to note Tom Cusick also had his hand raised. I'm not sure if he wanted to maybe add something to that or.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to just kind of follow up on what Dawn had talked about as far as anything future. And, you know, we've just completed an RFP and got a proposal back and awarded, in the process of awarding Ty and Bond a contract for us to really expand on this kind of work and discussions with West Newbury and kind of prioritizing and identifying lands that are similar to this that we would want to be able to move forward with. So again, it's nothing that's obviously on the table, but it's certainly an effort that I think we all think is worthwhile.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from the committee? Okay, then we can open this up for comment from public. Any raised hands? Okay, seeing none, then we're done with this project, and thank you very much for your presentations, and we'll move on to the next. Next project is again from the Newburyport Planning Office. Title of the project name is Clipper City Rail Trail Closing the Gaps. And Jordy Vining will be presenting this one as well.
Okay, Andy, maybe I could ask you to pull up the map on page 10 of the application, which sort of shows the trail network. Yeah. So I appreciate that you all are familiar with the Rail Trail project, which the city's been working on for the past 2 decades to create. And so just in terms of, I guess, hopefully quick overview, the trail, it's part open space, part linear park, part transportation network. I think it's a pretty unique new public recreational space, and it's enjoyed by thousands of people. We are currently focused on trying to close the gaps, the sort of most difficult gaps in the off-road network that loops around the heart of the city. I would note that many rail trails around the country have taken 20 or 25 years to build. It seems like a very long time. It's big chunk of my life has gone into this. These are very complex projects, but we seem to be in good company along those lines. We've, in terms of these pieces, these gaps we're looking to fill, I mean, this is all a result of a pretty systematic planning process that the city's pursued over the years. The Rail Trail project's been prioritized for many years, and by multiple city councils and multiple mayoral administrations, as well as all the city's plans, the open space and rec plans, the master plans, the old waterfront strategic plan, the Parker Street shared use pathway portion of the project down to the south there in the State Street intersection. That's a listed priority in the city's complete streets plan, which was done in the past year or two. And on the riverfront part, the approach of the revetment and berm and trail combination, that's based on the city's climate change vulnerability report. I think it's clear to many people this is a pretty high value project. In addition to recreational opportunities and high quality views of the Merrimack River for the shoreline section. Public safety is a real component of all this in terms of getting families and others off the roads, both at Water Street, where there's the interim detour up there, as well as at Parker Street, where there's essentially nowhere to go for pedestrians and bicyclists. I would also, I know there's been some that have opined that this is not a trail project. I would say that, of course, this is a trail project. This is a trail project, and it's a climate adaptation project. They're both intertwined together. And also, as I was just noting, that sort of suggestion that it's somehow not a trail project overlooks the part of the focus of the project on the Parker Street end of the trail loop. I would note that we've been pretty consistent about seeking and securing grant funding from multiple sources to push this complicated project forward. All those grants have required leveraging by city funding. So, over the course of the years, we've leveraged, I think, overall, nearly $10 million. So every dollar the city's invested in this project has brought in about $5 more. So that's a pretty good return, just economically, much less the actual facility we're able to provide for the public. And if we stop funding it now, or if we're sort of stopped in our tracks, we really risk essentially wasting a good deal of money that's been invested in, whether one goes back to the original purchase of the property or the cleanup of the contaminated soil that we're hopefully finishing up soon, as well as the development of design plans and permitting that we've been working on. Much less not addressing the ongoing risks, large and small, that the project is intended to address, whether we're talking about the individual public safety of families and others on the streets, or the broader threats of not addressing the vulnerable shoreline. Let's see, just quickly, as noted in the application, the shoreline section of the trail there, that shoreline was actually created in 1872. It's a man-made shoreline by the railroad. The natural shoreline was along Water Street. It used to have vertical seawalls for protection, and then some slope riprap was put in the early part of the 20th century. That has all fallen into substantial disrepair. The railroad was abandoned about 50 years ago. That area, FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Authority, indicates the base flood elevation for this shoreline is 14 feet, elevation 14 feet. And the base flood elevation for the adjacent wastewater treatment plant is 12 feet. So that base flood elevation number, many of you know, is sometimes called the 100-year flood, but that's a bit of a misnomer. These flooding can happen certainly much more frequently than once every 100 years. It's basically a statistical characterization, the 26% chance of that kind of flood event occurring every 30 years. So the existing shoreline, Andy's pulled up the picture here, it slopes from and declines from about 13.5 feet at the Joppa Park end, which is in the foreground of this photo. And then as the corridor travels along towards the American Yacht Club, it drops down to only about 8 feet. So that's substantially lower than the 12 and 14 foot base flood elevation that is the risk characterization. And we have actually seen recent storms flood and erode across the old rail corridor in the past couple of years, which is when Mass DOT suspended construction of the trail there. So that's all to say that this shoreline is vulnerable now, and it's only going to get worse with projected sea level rise. So based on all the consultants' recommendations, we need to rebuild and raise this slopestone revetment to a 14-foot elevation, and along with a raised berm to 14.5 feet elevation, and put the paved trail on top of that. Let's see, in terms of the use of the funds, there's a number of options on how this money will get used, depending on how other funding plays out. It's potentially a match for a municipal vulnerability preparedness state grant for construction funding. Alternatively, if that doesn't work out and we go the Mass DOT federal transportation funding route, this CPA allocation could help us with, I guess, significantly increased consultant design costs that come along as part of the strings attached to that federal funding. This funding will help with construction management during the construction phase, regardless of the funding supporting it. Hopefully, we're going to be done with the PCB cleanup pretty soon. We've gotten good signals on getting an additional smaller brownfields grant to help us close it out, but potentially we could help with that. There's a picture Andy's pulled up of the nearby shoreline where that's National Grid property, and they redid their sloped shoreline revetment there, and we installed the trail. And finally, I don't want to forget about the Parker Street end. This funding is going to help supplement, it's going to match the $400,000 Complete Streets grant we've received, which was essentially leveraged by the CPC allocation of $75,000 for the design phase for this project. And preliminary cost estimates have the construction cost estimate at $450,000. I'm almost done here. I just quickly, in terms of the status of that portion of the project, the phase 3 project, we're at a 50% design stage on the Parker Street shared use pathway. And he's just pulled up a plan sheet here that's focused on upgrading the crossing of State Street at Parker Street near True Value and the courthouse with a pedestrian activated signal, and then running the 10-foot paved pathway along the northern side of the road past True Value to Shepherd's Auto. And in recent months, we've been working with Mass DOT on meshing our project with their Route 1 Rotary project, which is coming along a little bit behind ours, but is going to bring people across Route 1 so we can connect back up to the phase 1 rail trail. And we've also been working on the other side, on the eastern side, with Ed Hill, private developer whose special permit condition has him building a section of the trail to the east there. So we are looking to set up a virtual public meeting in mid-May to go over this more with anyone who's interested. We are moving towards permitting with the Conservation Commission in the coming weeks. And our overall time frame is we're looking to pre-order the mast arms for that pedestrian activated signal, and then finalize plans, and if we're on track, bid this summer and start construction in the fall of this year for that section. And finally, in terms of the riverfront section, we have 25% plans for that section. We've been doing a lot of work on permitting recently. The Conservation Commission just approved an amended order of conditions. And just on Monday, the state MEPA office provided a so-called ENF certificate. And we're looking in the next few days to submit a Chapter 91 license application. And then there's a couple of others, Army Corps of Engineers CZM consistency and so forth. There's a lot of permitting associated with anything along the riverfront. And in terms of the construction funding sort of scenarios that I was outlining earlier, we anticipate applying for this MVP action grant in June. And at the same time, we're working with the Merrimack Valley Metropolitan Planning Organization to place a project on the Regional Transportation Improvement Program for federal transportation funding. And if that state grant is unsuccessful, we'll shift our focus to Mass DOT and the federal funding, which is a longer process, has more requirements, more costs for the city on the design end, and some delay in terms of implementation. So that's why that's Plan B. So that's, I may have gone on a little too long there, but CPA funding has been critical to this project, and basically we request your support as we move towards these final elements.
Okay, thanks, Jordy. Questions from the committee? Ron Zemba?
Yes, thank you, Mike. Jordy, I have two related questions. If this request that you've made is not approved because the federal and state money is uncertain, but then for some reason that money materializes, what do we do then? And then the related question is it possible that the state might pull back on their commitment, or the feds might pull back on their commitment after hearing that we have pulled back on ours?
Let's see. So a couple of questions there. I think what you may be alluding to on the first part is that, yeah, there is a risk of us sort of stopping in our tracks if we don't have funding either to match a grant or don't have funding to complete a intensive review process with Mass DOT and see that process through so that it can be bid out and then constructed, and we have resources in place to manage that construction process.
Yeah.
And Mass DOT's role in it. So we definitely need resources in hand to be able to pursue all of that. In terms of whether they pull back, if we apply for the grant but then can't demonstrate that we can match it, we could be awarded it, but then we wouldn't be able to see that through if we can't match it. Similarly, if we have the federal transportation funding allocated, and then we run out of money and we can't act our part, then they won't bid the project out. They won't finish their reviews. They'll bump the project. And part of this is a time concern because we know that there are public safety risks. I keep coming back to the fact that pedestrian was killed crossing State Street a couple of years back. We don't want something like that to happen again because we delay our work. It takes us years to do this kind of thing, but we don't want any unnecessary delays in being able to address those public safety concerns. Similarly, the interim detour along Water Street is much less than ideal. It's very narrow there. And as well as whether there's going to be other storm events hitting that shoreline. So we don't want it, it's not wise to have a project like this stalled.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you.
Don Walters, question?
Yes, thanks. Jordy, allow me to ask the question slightly different than what Ron just asked. We allocate the funds as you're requesting. The other funds don't come. It's my understanding because the funds that you're requesting are construction related, the worst case scenario is we grant you the funds and a year or so, whatever, you have to bring them back to us because you couldn't get matching funds. Is that a fair executive summary?
Yeah, I would say that theoretically, if somehow this whole project grinds to a halt and we can't get past the design phase, then we're not in a position to spend the money, and ultimately it would come back to the CPC to be allocated elsewhere.
And again, so just for certainty, are any of the funds that you're requesting for design?
At this point, we think, so I have two answers to that. We think we have, based on existing resources, enough to carry us through the design phase of both the Parker Street side as well as the riverfront side. Now, I would emphasize think, because these projects evolve as they go forward. We've had, because of increased requirements from the state for additional permitting, we've had to do change orders, of approximately $30,000. So that was, that wasn't anticipated last year. Similarly, on the Parker Street side, we have a little bit of a contingency with our CPA allocation for that, the survey and permitting and design, but things are inevitably get a little more complicated than one had originally anticipated, and we'll have to see whether that contingency gets eaten up and we potentially need a little bit more. So I see these grants as being flexible enough to support the whole project if and when these sorts of elements arise. The other part of the answer is if we need to go the federal transportation funding route, it will be inevitable that we will have increased demand on our consultants for design review. The Mass DOT process is very intensive, with multiple offices and divisions making comments on the design, insisting on changes, getting written response to multiple comments, and it definitely increases the cost of the design versus a purely municipal project. It's often worth it, just because then one has the construction funding in hand, but it is part of the trade-off.
Sure, thanks. Another question with respect to the rail trail elevation, where the northern terminus right now, i.e. right in front of the driveway for American Yacht Club. What's that elevation right there?
That's that low point that I was talking about with around 8 feet. So that's fairly low. And we will have, for the trail, we'll be ramping up at a 4.5% grade to meet handicapped accessibility requirements to get to that 14.5 foot elevation. And so that's the way we'll treat that end. It becomes a complicated process when one starts thinking about sea level rise and flooding, about sort of raising an entire neighborhood. In terms of the treatment plant there, we're looking at a sort of a parallel project to build flood walls. The city is looking to build flood walls back from this berm going back to Water Street. In terms of that other private property, we'll all have to have a community discussion about how that plays out over the years.
While I may have a follow-up question, Mike, I'm going to just defer and let some of the other folks to see their hands are raised. So please go with some of the other folks. Thanks, Mike. Thank you, Jordy.
Yeah.
Don Little, you have a question.
I had a couple questions, Don Little. So as the applicant stated on page 2, in the middle, it states for phase 3 Parker Street, approximately $50,000 is needed for funding. So just for my clarification, I mean, that suggests that this application is for 250,000. So the other 200,000 would be for the riverfront, this wastewater treatment area.
I would say in approximate terms, without sort of fully pinning it down, just because if we have to, if we go over the 75,000 that was allocated for the design phase, you know, we might have to dip into that a little bit, but that's basically the layout.
Yep. Okay, I just wanted clarification. I didn't see the $200,000 specified. Okay, the next question is an opinion, I guess. I thought most of our CPC money for the rail trail was for design, and it brought in the millions for the construction. So can you just clarify that in regards to this application?
Yeah, it's been for design, but it's also been for construction management. So there's a fair amount of resources which have to be spent. You know, for the past phases of the rail trail, we've gone the federal transportation funding route with Mass DOT, building it with a state contractor, and with the city providing the design and permitting, and then the consultant to provide construction management. So construction management is considered part of the construction phase. So we have done that in the past. And in this case, we're talking about what is the funding source going to be? Is it this state grant, which would allow the project to be fully a municipal project, and the state grant requires a construction funding match of 25%? Or would we be going with that other model of the federal transportation funding, where the city doesn't have to provide a construction match for the contractor, but does have to provide the construction management side? Does that answer the question?
Yep, that's fine. And just one final question.
Yeah.
On the timeline in the middle, it talks about February to December of 2020, design and permit for the Riverfront Gap Trail. So I presume that this section was designed before we hit the PCB problem. So is this permitting really the additional part for this whole cleanup and raising the berm?
That's basically correct. We had, for instance, an order of conditions from the local conservation commission for the trail project, and then they approved in the past couple of weeks an amendment to that existing order of conditions to accommodate the revisions to the plan. Basically, this increased amount of fill and this increased amount of hardened structure along the shoreline. In terms of the other state and federal permits involved, because of the regulations of those permitting processes, we basically tripped thresholds in terms of the amount of revetment work, which required us to get new permits, as opposed to just notices of project change or amending the old ones. The previously designed project, in addition to the trail itself, did involve some fill, raising it up a foot or two, and it did involve some rebuilding of the granite block seawall, but much less extensively. So we're basically working with the same sort of approach and same materials, but with a significant change in the amount of shoreline protection, hardened structure shoreline protection, as well as the amount of fill going in there.
Very good. I'm all set. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions from the committee? Good. Then I can open this application up to public comment. Please raise your hand if you'd like to make a comment.
Chair just said I would make a note. There was a phone call that's come in that's not under a name, so I'm going to allow that speaker to talk. I believe it's Counselor Eigenman.
Okay.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes, hi. My name is Jay Eigerman. I live at 83 High Street. I'm the president of the City Council, but I'm just speaking for myself. Thanks for letting me speak. I posed this application and I wanted to give my reasons in a time that could be useful to the committee. It's not a referendum on the rail trail, the application. It's just about whether you're going to earmark $250,000, $250,000 of scarce CPA money for recreation to the riverfront project. You just heard in the colloquy that really only $50,000 would go toward Parker Street. So really what this is about is the riverfront section. And I think that's a mistake, and I'll give the reasons. Again, looking at just at the application filed in February, there are actually two different projects going on here in one application. One is this segment of Rail Trail 2 by the sewage treatment plant, and that's estimated to have a project cost of $1.74 million. Part of the justification given is that if you were to give $250,000, that would be 25% match, and they could go get state money, and I'll return to that in a minute. But remember also, you've already given $250,000 to this exact same segment just last year. That's my understanding. So this would be now $500,000. Then there's the other part of the application, which was alluded to. That's a new segment, an entirely new segment of rail trail at State and Parker Streets. That's a totally different animal because they have in hand a $400,000 grant. So they only need $47,000 more. So, you know, $47,000, and then that project, a portion of Rail Trail 3 would be 100% funded. So my comments are really about the riverfront. The application does not differentiate, as Jordy told you. It's just a $250,000 lump sum that staff can then spend at its discretion. Now, I don't know how much exactly has been spent already on this segment of Rail Trail 2, starting at Water Street and going past the wastewater treatment center, but it's a lot. We know that first of all, that it was in the original drawings, Rail Trail 2, back in 2013, and there was money allocated to that. I'm not quite sure what spurred having to do a redo of the site. I gather it's both PCBs and erosion. It is what it is. Last year in the application, which was approved for $250,000, the budget was given at about $1.3 million, and the sources were identified as a Mass Trails grant, $300,000 that was pending at the time, and an earmark of $750,000 from a state bill. This time that it's come back, it's different. Now the budget is higher. It's 1.74. We still don't have the Mass Trails grant. I gather they didn't get it last year. They've applied for it again. But there's no mention of this earmark of $750,000. Instead, there's mention of a $1.4 million promise, which I'll return to. It's a high-cost project, is the point. You've already put in CPA money into it, and it's not clear where the end is going to be. We know that the biggest share, as of today, again, different story than 12 months ago, but the story now is that we have a verbal promise that in the competitive grants for protecting shoreline, we're in the running and we're going to get $1.4 million. That was just a phone call. And that's not much to hang on to. And it was also before the COVID-19 pandemic, and the state has since told us that they've lost billions in revenue since then. So that much money is very much in doubt. Also, the representation is made that, well, this is all about a parks project. or a recreation project, our shot at that $1.4 million grant, whether it was back in February or going in the future, is not because of the rail trail at this site. It's because of the wastewater treatment plant. That's why we're in the running for that grant. So you can't have it both ways. That's a sewage treatment plant project. Now the problem with the Community Preservation Act is it's not a reserve fund to cover all of the city's capital projects. It's supposed to be a special surtax for 4 classes of project: open space, public recreation, historic preservation, affordable housing. Those are things that otherwise get neglected in our city budget. There are other recreational projects that are deserving, that have been waiting a long time for their turn. And I provided some data on that. It speaks for itself. You know, if the committee still feels that the rail trail does deserve attention, that it's not time to turn to other cities and parks, so be it. But you have another application before you to fix asphalt in Rail Trail Phase 1. I think you heard that in March. And as we've already said, and Don Little pointed out, with $47,000, not $250,000, you could build a new segment at State and Parker Streets. So that's the point I'm trying to make. It's a scarce resource. You're already in the hole. You just gave $250,000 of CPA money, and we're really no closer to this project. And I didn't even mention other funds that have gone towards this project at the riverfront. We approved 9-2 at the city council. I voted for it. $75,000 of free cash. Remember also that the sewer department has a reserve fund, so there's money there. So that's the point I'm trying to make, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Eigenman. Are there other public comments? Okay, seeing none, we will close that section of the meeting having to do with the presentation of applications. Committee, if you would stick with us for...
Actually,
we do have one more. I'm sorry, I had to turn the page on my agenda here. There we go.
Okay.
You know, you can be high tech, but then you got to turn the page. Okay. We have an application from the Open Space Committee of the City of Newburyport for an open space reserve contribution to the reserve fund. And I am now removing myself from the chair, and I'm walking around in front of the committee because I'm going to present this on behalf of the Open Space Committee, and I will be quick. This application is very similar to the applications that you have received most years in the past, requesting that contributions be made to the savings account so that we may take advantage of future acquisition opportunities of acquiring interests in open space to preserve them. This year we are requesting an amount be reserved in the amount of $100,000. And I'd like to point out that the Open Space Committee does fully support the city's current application to use the $225,000 of the current open space reserve to help secure protection for the water supply in partnership with West Newbury for the application you heard earlier this evening. So this is our request that we continue to replenish the savings account so that we can be ready for additional opportunities, which may include some of that additional land to further protect the water supply over in West Newbury if those opportunities come forward. As before, this is for reserve. It's not for appropriation, so that any future project would have to come with project-specific requirements before the committee for consideration for further recommendation and appropriation by City Council. Are there any questions from the committee? No questions? Are there any public comment? Okay, I don't think, seeing none, then now we can close that section of the agenda and move on. First thing I'd like to talk about is the rescheduling of our deliberations meeting. The suggestion's been made since the 26th is not available that we do the same thing we did this month and move it one day and reschedule for the 27th of next month. I'd like to ask if there's anybody who is not available on the 27th. I guess you'll have to raise your hand since I see a lot of mutes. I see no hands raised. Hearing no objection, I would ask that Caitlin reschedule the May meeting for May 27th for purposes of deliberations and anything else that might come up in the meantime to be placed on that agenda. There's a hand raised by Paul.
Yeah, I was just wondering, since at our next meeting, if we are going to be considering taking that money for the West Newbury property out of the open space reserves, is that something that we might want to start the ball rolling on at the next meeting to get that to City Council, et cetera? There's no need, if it's coming out of reserves, there's no need to wait for all the other deliberations.
No, I just thought that I don't believe that Jordy indicated that was that the month between now and the deliberation with the rest of the docket was a necessary acceleration.
Okay.
Yeah. Jordy, if you're still here, please raise your hand. Okay. Jordy, you've got the floor.
Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
That's indeed true. I don't think that month is going to make a sort of material difference to the project. I appreciate Paul's implicit support there, but I think that's fine to keep it on track with the others.
Okay.
Thanks, Jordy. Okay. Okay, then, Caitlin, if you could take care of that rescheduling for us. And we have another piece of general business, which is the extension of the grant from last year for the Edible Avenue. And I believe that somebody is here, at least they were earlier. Yes, Jane, you're here?
I am here.
I have a question for you. I did forward your 2 emails to me to the committee, and I know there's a clear request that you'd like an extension on the use of the prior grant, but the second part of that, in terms of changing the scope of the ask and allocating some money to design. I wasn't sure from your second email whether that aspect was withdrawn. because you have some other resources to call on.
Yeah, I have withdrawn it. I'm halfway through the design work myself, and I have a professional to do some pro bono work.
Okay, good. Then before us, committee, as I understand it, we have a request to extend the time within which they can use the fund. How much more time were you looking for, Jane?
Well, I think I could do everything by the next quarterly report, which is June 15th. But if I had till August 15th, which is the following quarterly report, that would be even better. But if that's irritating in any way, then I think we could do it by June 15th.
Okay. I'd entertain a motion from any committee member on the extension.
Mike, this is Doug Walters, so moved to, and I would suggest August 15th.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Vote on it again.
Okay, so we have a motion, and is there a second?
Second.
And who was that?
Oh, that was Paul.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Okay, it's been moved and seconded to extend this project to August 15. Any other discussion? No hands raised. All in favor, I'd like you to raise your hand, okay?
Actually, Mike, this is Andy.
Yep.
If I could, just to make it easier, could we perhaps do a roll call vote? I think it's easier for the note taker and for the recording to capture it that way.
Oh, you mean you can't take a picture of the screen here? Okay. All right, we're going to have a roll call vote. I'm going to run down the list. Mark Rosen.
Yay.
Ron Zimba.
Yes.
Paul Healy.
Yes.
Don Walters.
Yes.
Don Little.
Yes.
Jane Healy.
Yes.
Okay, and the chair votes yes.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome, Jane.
And
Thanks.
I'd just like to point out that the service berries will be ripe in June.
Okay, excellent. All right, so it looks like we've covered the agenda. Does anybody else have any further business for us tonight? Just raise your hand. Ron, your hand is.
We have minutes to approve.
Do we? Do we? Yes, we do.
Yes, you do.
Let me look. Indeed, we do. We have been provided the minutes of March 10, 2020. Okay, I will take a motion to approve. Is there anybody?
So moved.
And who's that? Paul?
Oh, yeah.
You usually do. Okay. And a second.
Jane Healy, second.
Okay. Is there any discussion? Okay, hearing nothing, like another roll call vote for approval of the minutes. Ron Zimba?
Yes.
Jane Healy?
Yes.
Paul Healy?
Yes.
Don Walters?
I'm abstaining. I was absent.
Okay, that's good. Don Little?
Yes.
Mark Rosen?
Yes.
Chair votes yes. Okay, any further business?
Mike, may I ask a question?
Certainly. Who's this?
This is Jordy.
Okay, Jordy.
I just, you can certainly say no, especially after this long meeting, but I was wondering if you wanted me to respond to any of those points that Councilor Eigerman had been raising in terms of his opposition to the project.
I think probably not at this point, since I closed that section of the agenda, and Councilor Eigerman has moved on.
Okay.
So thank you for the offer.
Okay.
This is Andy Port. Perhaps I could make a recommendation, since the CPC about a month from now will be doing deliberations, if you could just put together a simple email with any comments you think are worth their consideration, and Caitlin can forward that on.
Will do.
Yes, the substance of Councilor Eigerman's objections were provided to us by email. So that's part of the record. So if you would like to provide your email as well, we can place that in the file.
Okay, very good. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Jordy. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience with me tonight and getting through this. Wasn't as bad as I thought it might be.
Mike, this is Jane Healy.
Hi, Jane.
Hi, I do have one follow-up to Jordy's question. If you could review with the members the process that we might go through if we do have follow-up questions between now and the deliberation meeting. If we had questions for any of the applicants, including
Okay,
Jordy.
yes, certainly. The questions for the applicants, if you could just drop an email to Caitlin and copy Jane and I, and we will cause the communication to go out to the applicant and give them a time frame on when they need to get the answers back to us in email form, and then we'll share it with the entire committee as a portion of the agenda package.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Ron, you keep getting your hand up there.
I'm sorry.
Don't be sorry. I just think it's great. You're all in. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. I think we can close the meeting and adjourn.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
You too.
Bye.
Bye now.
Good night.